You're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup with me, Roisin the Cleric.
And me, Paul Brophy.
During the 2024 European election campaigns, I had the pleasure of meeting our guest for this interview, Senior Counsel Barrister Mc Gurk. When I turned up and recorded an impromptu interview after Una was a guest on local radio European candidates panel debate. Mc Gurk SC, retired from practice, is an Irish barrister and senior counsel with a deep interest in justice and human rights. Una has had a very diverse career with experience and expertise in a multitude of disciplines in areas of civil and criminal law, including refugee and mental health law, with a strong career focus on human rights. Una served on many government tribunals in quasi-judicial roles. Una McGurk says her goal in life is to empower individuals and communities to have and to live in a just and fair society. As a committed humanitarian, Una has many highly developed life skills, including legal expertise and experience in negotiation, mediation, conflict resolution, and geopolitics. Una McGurk, you are very welcome once again to the Irish Political Roundup.
Thank you very much, Roisin and Paul. It's a pleasure to be here.
Una, you are an esteemed barrister here in Ireland, especially around the area of human rights and immigration. Over the last 5 years, you have been front and center in the public area of highlighting issues relating to the consequences of the COVID restrictions, censorship, cancel culture, and issues relating to free speech. We here in Ireland had the strictest lockdowns in Europe, I believe. I would like to touch on the COVID issues a little bit later on, but first if we could talk about Ireland's immigration problem first. We here in Ireland have an immigration crisis and an emigration problem with most of our brain drain of our highly skilled and educated grown-up children emigrating to other parts of the world due to our cost of living and housing crisis. You spoke recently with a YouTuber, Unbroken Man, about the immigration crisis here in Ireland. So let's start off with the topic of immigration and the increase of immigration here in Ireland.
Una, there's been an increase in immigration entering the country with many different cultures, which some might say are culturally incompatible with Irish culture. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it is clear. I don't have the statistics, but they're widely available and they're out there on mainstream media that, yes, we have had a significant increase in the numbers of people coming to Ireland. That's both legal immigrants and illegal immigrants who come usually as international protection applicants or asylum seekers, and they come looking for refugee status. So we've effectively had both, and both are still coming into Ireland at the moment. Yes, that's correct.
And we've had an increase, especially after the former minister, Roderick O'Gorman. He put out 8 posts in 8 different languages telling people, come to Ireland and, you'll have your own front door and accommodation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that was really a shocking thing for a government minister to do. And if it had happened 20 years ago, he would have been fired on the spot and the government might even have collapsed, because what he did was he issued tweets in 8 different languages, including Arabic. You know, how many million, I think it is, maybe is it 1 billion people speak Arabic all over the world. And this was sent out, these tweets were sent out. I mean, they should have been redacted. They should have been taken down the following day, but they weren't. And really what's happening here is, and many people don't realize this, is that there is a plan. And this is a plan by the Irish government. It's called Project 2040, and it is a plan that goes from 2015. It's a 25-year plan from 2015 to 2040, and it was officially launched in 2018. Now, it's essentially, it has or was essentially spearheaded by Fine Gael ministers, namely Simon Coveney and Leo Varadkar at the time. Simon Coveney, as you know, his mentor was Peter Sutherland, the late Peter Sutherland, otherwise known as the father of globalism, and someone who very strongly promoted the concept of migration into Europe, which is now causing such a problem. But in any event, the essence of this plan, Project Ireland 2040, is that the government intended to have in Ireland, both north and south, a population of 8 million by 2040 and 10 million by 2050. And this was by means of bringing people into the country. And so this is how they're going to increase the population. Because as we know, birth rates are dropping in Ireland. I think they've gone down 23% in the last 2 years. We have abortion rates are going up. It's now running at 10,000 per year. And then many of our young people are emigrating. And so what we have is an increase in births to foreign mothers. It's gone up by 114%. So insofar as the government will fill this quota of people they intend to be living here, I think it's very plain and obvious to anybody observing the situation that they won't be filling this quota with Irish people or native Irish people. It's going to be non-native Irish people.
And Paul, we were up in the Dáil the day before the summer recess, and there was a TD that put out a question about birth rates. Yes. So
Edward Timmins of Fine Gael mentioned that the have come down. Strangely enough now,
Paul, Paul, I'm going to you sit back a bit because you're just breaking up. Maybe lower your camera a wee bit. You're just breaking up and we can't see you. Okay.
Sorry.
Speak a little bit slower. Okay, right, go, because it's affecting the internet. So, Paul, we were up at the Dáil the day before the summer recess, and Fine Gael, which is a Fine Gael TD, brought up about the birth rate.
He did, and he did bring up about the reducing birth rates, and that it seems to be a pattern, kind of not just in Ireland but in other parts of the world as well, that the indigenous birth rate seems to be dropping.
Yes, and
yes, absolutely. I mean, we will inevitably end up being a minority in our own country. What's interesting about the Project 2040 plan was that it was officially launched in 2018, which of course was the same year that you had the repeal of the eighth referendum in Ireland, which brought in abortion. So I think all of these issues are linked. And of course, when I spoke about Roderick O'Gorman, I mean, the fact that he did that, sent out the tweets in 8 languages is very significant, because we just don't know how many people came in as a consequence of those tweets, and or how many are coming in at the moment still as a consequence of those tweets, because they've never been redacted or they've never been withdrawn. And you see, the issue is that the government has a plan. And I believe that's the reason why they've never taken any measures, or any really significant measures, to halt the tide of immigrants coming in. You have obviously the legal immigrants. Now, it seems to me they're handing out visas and work permits like confetti at a wedding. And it's not clear what restrictions they have in place to govern the inflow of people, or what guidelines they have in place to ensure that everybody who comes in meets the appropriate standards and requirements in order to work in the various sectors in Ireland. As you know, in Australia, they have a very strict points system. And unless you fulfill the criteria under the points system, you won't be allowed to become a resident or subsequently a citizen. Whereas here, it's not clear what system are we using to vet the people who are coming in legally into the country. That's the first thing. Now, what I need to emphasize, both with regard to my comments regarding both legal and illegal immigrants, is that what we're talking about here are numbers. We're not talking about individuals. I think every one of us knows one or more non-nationals who are here in Ireland, working in Ireland, who have integrated, who are making a great contribution to this country. And they're contributing to Ireland, and we're very happy to have them. So it's really about the numbers. That is the problem. So the first thing is, we don't really know or understand the exact circumstances under which legal migrants are coming into the country. We're simply told that we need them. For example, we're simply told that, oh, our health system would collapse if it wasn't for all the foreign doctors and the foreign nurses. Yes, but what about our Irish doctors and Irish nurses who are leaving because the terms and conditions are not appropriate for them to work in Irish hospitals or in the Irish public health system, and because they cannot afford houses? So there has never been a public debate allowed by this government or previous governments on these issues, because they don't actually care about the views of the citizens, because they have a plan, as I said to you, and the end goal is to fulfill this quota that they've been instructed to fill, and they haven't received those instructions or mandate from the Irish people. They're clearly getting their instructions from from globalists, and most likely from other supranational organizations like the EU and the WEF. And as we know, many government ministers are members of the WEF and are graduates of the Young Leaders Program, which was organized by Klaus Schwab. So these people are clearly taking their instructions from other entities, which means they are not acting for and on behalf of the Irish people with regard to this particular program. Then with regard to the illegal immigrants, we know that these numbers are increasing. It's really quite obvious. It's a major problem, not just in Ireland, but also in Europe. And my concern, and that of many others, is that there is nothing now being put in place or in place which can halt the tide of the numbers, which are coming up steadily from sub-Saharan Africa up through Europe, across the English Channel, and many of them are then coming up through the UK and crossing from Stranraer to Larne and coming straight down into the IPO office. And the Minister for Justice, the current Minister for Justice, Jim O'Callaghan, has admitted that, because they're coming straight down and they're applying immediately for international protection. And so this is what's happening. They're also coming, of course, across from the Middle East as well, and taking the same route. Now, we don't have any border checks or control on our border between Ireland and Northern Ireland, so this is a problem. There is also an issue with them coming in into the ports or in by plane. And as we know, it was very, very serious problem recently where they were all destroying their passports coming in. The government were not applying the Immigration Act, because it is actually an offence to land in a country without your documentation. And I think there was only one prosecution between 2019 and 2024, and I don't believe that there was a conviction. So what happens is they're bypassing the Immigration Act and they're going straight into the asylum system then at that point. And the other issue that I think, there's a couple of other issues which are relevant to the numbers, because I presume your question or your query relates to the numbers. The Irish government could have detention centres here in Ireland. They could have them close to the airports or the ports, whereby people who come in without the proper documentation, such as their valid visa or their passports, could be kept in detention. I'm talking about proper circumstances where their human rights are respected, until such time as it is determined where they've come from. And that hasn't been happening. And there is scope for the Irish government to do that under the Reception Directive, to which we have subscribed, and is part of the law here in relation to the asylum process. But our government has not done that. And I believe that if they did that, that would act as a very significant deterrent to the numbers coming in. And it's very interesting that in Denmark, for example, which is also part of the EU, they do have detention centres, and their numbers have reduced significantly. They have, I think last year it was either 470 or 740 applicants for asylum in Denmark, because many of them knew they would have to go into detention centres. They didn't want that. They knew by coming to Ireland, they could bypass all our legal restrictions, go straight to the IPO office, and straight away they would be given the appropriate cards, and they would just be in the system. So the government have not put in that deterrent. And then, of course, they have all the members of the Oireachtas and the government, of course, opted in to the EU Asylum and Migration Pact as well. And once we did that, we effectively lost control of our borders. We just ended up ceding more sovereignty to unelected bureaucrats in Brussels, which means that now relocated asylum seekers can be sent to Ireland, and the numbers and quotas will be determined by unelected bureaucrats in Brussels, not Irish officials. We've no control over that. And if we choose not to take any relocated asylum seekers, we will have to pay a penalty of €20,000 per annum per asylum seeker in perpetuity. So that's what our government and our members of the Dáil and the Seanad signed up to last year. You may recall I was endeavouring to try and halt that process, and I know many people responded to the endeavours of myself and others to lobby TDs and senators not to sign up to the EU Migration Pact. And thankfully, many of them didn't. But unfortunately, the numbers who did were in the majority. And as a consequence, now that pact is in being and it's in place. So all of these issues are feeding into what you've said, Paul, about the numbers and the increase in numbers. And I cannot see at the moment how those numbers are going to decrease. And then underlying all of these issues that I've just set out is that plan by the Irish government. And I think many people are unaware of that plan, which is why I wanted to bring it to your attention.
And also, you've mentioned before in previous interviews that you said that a lot of the legal migrants coming over are unaware of our housing problem and our housing crisis. And in that, a lot of our educated and working and skilled young people are competing against the legal migrants coming here, competing to even rent a house, never mind renting a house, but renting a room, and then in the bidding in purchasing a house.
You're absolutely right, Roisin. And yes, you said it and I've said it before. Of course, many of the people, both the legal and the illegal immigrants coming into the country are often unaware of the difficulties that Irish people have. But like once they're here, they tend not to leave again unless they absolutely have to. So the more people who come in, the more it's adding to the problem. We have a serious housing crisis. We have a serious housing shortage and deficit, and it's having a detrimental effect on all those people who have to rent and also all those people who want to buy a house. I mean, it's now statistically impossible for a young couple, even if they've both got good jobs, to buy a house. It really is. The cost of houses has gone up exponentially, and so as a consequence, many of them are having to leave. And in addition, they're now competing with legal migrants for houses. And some of those legal migrants have come in under DEI programs, which are run by multinationals, either big pharma companies or technological companies who have these DEI programs, which is diversity, equity and inclusion. And these are programs which, are not run on merit. so people can get into those programs and, you know, maybe accepted as employees, even, you know, in circumstances where an Irish person would, you know, on merit, one could argue, be more entitled to the position, but they're not getting it because they don't come within the DEI concept. So a lot of Irish, so whilst we have all these multinationals here, they're not always employing Irish people. So there are not always those benefits, even if the government is getting benefits from a tax perspective, we're not always getting a benefit from an employee perspective. And that's something to bear in mind. Donald Trump, as you know, has abolished the concept in the US. I think maybe we need to look at it here as well, because it's not fair, I think, that people are being brought in under these concepts when Irish people can't get jobs in their own country and have to leave. And when you add to that problem, we have now essentially a breakdown of the social cohesion in the country, because all our services are stretched, whether it's medical, whether it's hospitals, doctors, GPs. Irish people are now having to make appointments with their GPs 2 weeks in advance. There are many GPs now are saying, sorry, our doors are closed. We can't take any more people. There was a time, and not so long ago, when you could simply walk in off the street into a GP's surgery to have your issue dealt with. Now you have to make an appointment, and if it's an emergency, you have to go to A&E and you have to wait for a long time. So the Irish people are losing out because of all the people that are coming in. In addition, it's the same in schools. Children whose parents and grandparents grew up in a particular area now are having to leave that area to go to school elsewhere in order to accommodate, and so that the school can accommodate the children of either legal or illegal immigrants. And then the numbers are also going to increase. I just want to say this because there are what are known as family reunification programs. So not only are we having to deal with the immigrants come in themselves, but they frequently can apply to bring in their family members. So the numbers are going to increase and increase. We don't have the services to cater for that. We don't have the houses to facilitate that. We are simply not building enough houses at the rate that people are coming in. And then on top of that, just recently in August, there was a decision in response to a question that was asked by the Irish High Court of the European Court of Justice, in which the European Court of Justice effectively said that, you know, that international applicants are entitled to a certain standard of accommodation when they come into Ireland, or indeed any EU country. And that, you know, it's not sufficient that they should be out in tents, out on the street, that they're entitled to have. And basically what it said was that EU members are required to guarantee applicants for international protection material reception conditions that ensure an adequate standard of living, whether through housing, financial aid, vouchers, or a combination of the three. And if the EU member states don't do that, because this ruling applies to all of the EU member states, not just Ireland, these countries are potentially liable to these people for compensation if we don't supply that adequate housing. So from where are the government going to get the adequate housing for the numbers that are coming in over which they have no control?
And
Yeah. Sorry, Roisin, go ahead.
no, go for it, Paul.
And it's been well documented that the amount of money that has been spent on IPAS reception centres, which is in the region of billions, and a lot of those IPAS reception centres are former hotels, so that has had an impact on our tourism industry as well, because
Absolutely.
hotel beds, B&Bs that were there are out of the system, and as a result, the tourism numbers visiting the country have gone down. So there is a knock-on impact, and from what
There
we can see
absolutely is.
from the
Yes.
data, there's a very small group of people who are making a lot of money off this.
Mm-hmm. There is indeed, and as you said, and where I'm living at the moment, it's a county that really relies to a very large extent on the tourism industry, and in many respects, it has been decimated, and this is well documented. And as a consequence, Irish people are suffering. Their income is down, unless, of course, you're a landlord or you're lucky enough to own an IPAS Center, in which case the chances are you've probably become a multimillionaire. Over the last 5 years, it's estimated that the Irish government have spent something like 4.5 billion euro paying for accommodation for Ukrainians and accommodation in IPAS centres. And in one instance, a number of million, I think it was Nick Delahunty who exposed this, I think something like 7.5 million has been paid to one landlord who happens to be the uncle of one of the top advisors to Simon Harris on Taoiseach.
And they're also related to the advisor to Keir Starmer as well.
Indeed. Indeed. So some people, so we're creating an elite class of landlords and multi-millionaires who have, had large accommodation centres who could cope with these numbers, and then everybody else is suffering. So this is unacceptable. This is not the way to govern a country. This clearly shows that this Irish government, and indeed previous governments, are not in any way concerned about the health, the well-being, the welfare of its own citizens. They're clearly answering to some kind of globalist agenda.
And also,
which is not for our benefit.
No, multiculturalism doesn't always work. And because you've mentioned before, it can create like a ghettoization where people are all in the same language. They're just all put together, and it becomes a ghetto. And they don't like that either. They've left their own country, and they're coming to a completely different culture. And a lot of them don't accept or embrace the Irish culture. They think they're going to bring their own culture here, but yet their own culture in their own country is thriving.
That's right. Multiculturalism doesn't work, and there have been many studies on that. And as I indicated in that other video, it leads to ghettoization, which has a negative impact, not just for us, but also for these communities. I mean, what is the point in them being here? And I'm a great believer in solving and resolving the issue at source. If people had a genuine concern about these people whom they claim are, coming in, they're fleeing war and persecution, I can tell you they're not. I worked in the system. The vast majority of them are not fleeing war and persecution. They're coming here for the social welfare benefits. And, that's something that, people need to bear in mind. So as I said, it leads to ghettoization. This is absolutely not healthy.
And you also mentioned before, and I thought it was quite really interesting to me, because I never thought about it that way before. Humanity is tribal by nature, so immigration doesn't work for them either.
Yes, that's right. Humanity is tribal by nature, and and that's why you end up having ghettoization. Because if you have people coming in here who don't speak the language and have completely different cultures and customs, they're not going to integrate with us, and vice versa. So we're inevitably hoarding these people into ghettoization, and any kind of integration is really nothing more than a pipe dream.
Yeah.
It just simply will not work, Roisin. Definitely not.
And sorry, Paul.
Sorry, Rush. I think it was Nick Delahunty actually mentioned it during his presidential campaign pitch. He talked about the Danish model where regards integration, where you'd have the main culture that would be the main thing, and then you'd have different ethnicities as well. So So it's based on the fact that you have your main culture, you have to accept that, and then other cultures, they just have to try
Yes.
integrate
People
into
who
that.
come here should be prepared to integrate,
Yeah.
and it should be part of the process. But this is where the concept of human rights has really gone too far, where this idea that we must completely and absolutely accept and respect every aspect of every culture is not appropriate, because certain cultures and religions do not want to integrate with us. And in fact, their ethos is very much at odds with our ethos, which is a Judeo-Christian ethos. And, without naming it specifically, we know that there is a certain religion out there whose duty is to create caliphates and to ensure that we don't have Judeo-Christianity. This is unacceptable, and we can't have that in this country. But once again, there's no debate about this issue. There's no allowance for debate or for any opinion that varies from what the government's opinion is, which is that we must bring as many people in as possible, and we don't have to really investigate them or know where they're from. And so many people have come in here and have gone through the system and have been accepted by the system, and to this day we really genuinely do not know where they came from. There was a study done by, I think, the Jewish university, which estimated that Ireland had the second highest number of ISIS fighters members of ISIS amongst its Muslim population. That was in 2018. So has it gone up since then, or has it gone down? Or indeed, does anybody know? I doubt it, because once again, we didn't have detention centres where these issues could be determined and clarified. So it's just like, it's a free for all. Anybody can come in. We don't know who they are or where they're coming from. And as you know, migrant crime has gone up. And you mentioned this earlier with regard to one of the reasons why, apart from the fact that many of the hotels and the guest houses have been taken up and turned into IPAS centres, another reason why tourists and visitors are not coming to Ireland is because of the increase in migrant crime. And they've been told by their embassies that it's not safe to come to Ireland. And Dublin is no longer classified as a safe country. So this is very serious. And the other issue I wanted to mention, and I apologize, it went out of my head at the time, but if I may say it now in case I forget. None of us want a situation where any human being anywhere in the world is under siege, is suffering by virtue of war, by virtue of persecution in their own country, is living in circumstances where they or their children do not have enough to eat, or they're living in fear. There is nobody with a beating heart in Ireland or anywhere else who wants that for any other human being. But what I would say is that the solution is not to bring people from the third world into Ireland to destroy the social cohesion of Ireland and its people. The answer is to solve the problem at source. We need to send our diplomats and our ministers and our volunteers out to these places to resolve these conflicts, whether we do it through the UN, whether we do it through other international organizations. But there are ways and means in which Ireland can play a huge role in resolving world conflicts to such an extent that there is no need for these people to leave their country, but that we can change the circumstances in their country whereby they can stay and make a contribution to their own country, and then allow the Irish people to stay in their country and make a contribution to their own country without sending our best and brightest out of Ireland to make a contribution in other countries, like, for example, Australia. And the end result is that we in Ireland, we're losing out every which way because of this bizarre policy by the Irish government, which is not in the interests of the Irish people, no matter what way you look at it.
And I grew up in the Middle East. I grew up in Africa. And when we went to the Middle East, we had to submit all our family's history. We had to apply for visas. We had to make sure, we had to go through all the protocols. My daughter was working as a doctor in Australia. The scrutiny that she went in was so stressful that everything, they double checked, triple checked all her documents, her history, her, did she have a criminal background? Everything, and all her documents. And ensuring that all her, they even wanted her exam results from when she was in junior cert. The schools that she went to. And yet the difficulty that she had in just going to working in Australian hospital for 1 year was nobody who applies for Irish visas would go through coming here.
You're absolutely right. I don't know of anyone who has to go through those checks and balances. And thank you for highlighting that, because that's your personal experience. My own nephew as well went to Australia. He was very highly qualified in certain areas. He had to jump through hoops and redo all the tests over and over again just to get in. And now thankfully he succeeded and he's doing very well. But I don't believe that the people coming in here on the visas being handed out like confetti at a wedding by the Irish authorities are having to go through the same processes. And we're hearing anecdotally that there are concerns about standards in certain establishments and institutions for that very reason. We live in an era where it's very easy to to forge documents. Now, I'm not saying that people who've come in here have forged their documents. I need to be very careful about that. There are some very, very highly qualified, competent, excellent people who are non-nationals working in our health service. I've met them myself. I know them. But I also know that they have concerns themselves because they know that others have come in and haven't got the proper or appropriate qualifications. So basically what's happening now is that our standards are dropping all the time. And this just is not good enough. And the other thing that really upsets me, and even though I wasn't blessed to be a mother myself, I have nieces and nephews that I love very much, and grandnieces and grandnephews. But what's happening now is that my sisters and many people like them will never really know their grandchildren in the way that my grandmother knew us. The only relationship they can have with their children is via a screen. Their grandchildren rather, and their children, of course, as well. How tragic is that? I mean, the cost of flights to Australia is phenomenal, and only those who have a lot of money can actually go. So there's a whole generation of women of my age, older and younger, who now will never know their grandchildren other than through a screen. And to me, that is tragic. And that is a direct consequence of government policy. I was blessed to grow up with my grandmother living beside me. And she was a wonderful influence in my life. And I don't know where I'd be without her. And and to think that my nieces and nephews, my grandnieces and nephews, don't have that with their grandparents is really not acceptable to me. And it's just something that I want to highlight. It's the human side of what's happening. And yet this government are mysteriously going out of their way to engage in this fake, faux virtue signaling for other people. If they cared about other people in other countries, what they would do is send out a SWAT team of Irish people out to these countries to sort their problems out. They could send out teachers and lawyers and people to teach them how to have governance, people who are experts in conflict resolution, like a proper SWAT team to go out there and help the natives and the locals fix the problems in their own countries so that they don't have to come back. If the problems need to be escalated or dealt with at a higher level, they can do it through the UN. That's what our diplomatic corps are for. That's their duty. That's their job. Why aren't they dealing with this? This nonsense of saying, oh, there's a problem, so let's bring everybody in. Why should you bring some people in from a country? and not everybody. I mean, it's grossly unfair when you think about it.
Yeah.
And we cannot accommodate the entirety of the third world. We simply cannot. We're a tiny little island nation, you know, on the western seaboard of Europe. And, you know, with what's happening now, our culture is being erased. We are being displaced and we are being replaced if this absurd policy continues.
Well, McGurk, I'm completely, again, just amazed at your wisdom, your knowledge, your life experience, and everything that you have. Because your background is in immigration law. You've worked in that area and of refugees, so you know exactly what you're talking about. And it's great to actually have a senior counsel barrister here with us and talking about the legalities of it, because it's really important that we get the people with the experience to come
Absolutely.
on and talk about it.
And you see, what's interesting is this, and I will say this, I was involved, you know, 25 years ago in the initial stages of setting up an asylum system. And as a humanitarian, I am, you know, my heart bleeds for anybody who's genuinely suffering and has to come, you know, has to come and seek refuge somewhere. But the problem is the situation has changed drastically. It's now become a big business. The big international human trafficking business.
Yeah.
And basically, a lot of the people who come are having to pay agents to take them to Ireland. And they're often promised circumstances and situations which they don't get when they arrive here. And then, of course, there's the element of sexual trafficking as well, which is a major problem too. So it's big business internationally and it's big business nationally. And that has to stop. In order to respect the dignity of the individual. But the best way to do that is for people really to be and to remain, except in exceptional circumstances, to be and to remain in their own homes, in their own countries, where they can live lives of dignity and safety and justice. And what we should be doing as a nation is using our expertise to go out there into the world to ensure that this happens. And if needs be, we can bring people in to train them up and to teach them skills that they can utilize to bring back to their own countries. Now, that would be a very sensible solution to the problem. But you see, there's the plan. And I keep coming back to this dastardly plan about where a group of politicians without any mandate from the people decided that we should have North and South, 10 million people living in our country by 2050. And who are they to decide that?
It's not
without the support and the mandate of the Irish people.
Yeah. You touched on the human trafficking. Paul and I recorded a video on human trafficking, child trafficking. But Ireland, we'll just touch on this briefly because we might get you back on to talk about this with another interview. Ireland is on, before COVID, Ireland was on tier 2 of the world's watch list of the child trafficking list, taking off on COVID because we were on lockdown, yet all our borders were open, our sea, our land and air borders were all open. So that still, and we were still one of the highest countries in human and child trafficking and for sexual exploitation. And we're still, we looked it up, we're back on as tier 2 of the world's watch list of child trafficking.
But in fact, the Irish government are responsible for this because by virtue of the fact that we don't have any proper, secure border controls, they are enabling this very problem to happen. So that's what our government are doing. They're enablers of the human trafficking problem by virtue of their open border policy.
And you said,
and they need to be held accountable and they need to be held responsible. But as you know, the mainstream media, as the fourth estate, whose duty it is to hold the government to account on all of these issues, are not doing their job. And that's why it's down now to people like you and Paul to do it. And bless you for doing it, and bless you for highlighting these issues. And the more people who are aware of it, the better. So thank you.
And McGurk, we were going to talk about COVID and the COVID restrictions. I think we'll bring you back on to talk about that. We also want to talk to you about the hate speech laws.
Yeah.
And we also want to talk to you about the human trafficking as well going forward. We'd love to have you on more often as a guest and as a panel guest speaker as well, because I said to Paul, Paul and I were talking one night, and Paul says, who was your favorite person? Who did you enjoy most to interviewing during the European elections? I said, McGurk. And I said, Paul says, why? I said, she was just so friendly, so ladylike, so dignified. And I said, it was Una McGurk. So when you touched base with me again, I went, oh my God, Una McGurk, because I knew you were so busy. And I sent you a message once saying, we'd love to have you on, and you were busy. And I said, get back to me when you're not so busy. But it's lovely to have a real woman who's supporting other women, and you do it for the right reasons, with dignity and grace and femininity. And I think we need that back into everything.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you for those very kind words, Roisin. Flattery will get you everywhere. How could I refuse another invitation if I'm going to be treated so well? So thank you for that. It's very kind. I just do my best, and I always, my intention is always to give accurate and up-to-date information. And if I have said anything that's inaccurate, please forgive me in advance, because my modus operandi is always just to speak the truth about what's going on and to tell people the truth. I think we live in an era where it's so important that people know the truth about everything. It has a very important energy. And I think it will help us all to navigate these difficult times. And also what I really want is for people to hold their politicians to account in whatever way they can, because that job is not being done by the mainstream media. So it's up to people like you and Paul and others and all those wonderful digital warriors out there who are doing amazing work, who've come on the scene, especially in the last 5 years. And every one of you are to be commended for the incredible work that you're doing. So keep it up. And between us all, if we just keep speaking truth, truth will prevail in the end. I firmly believe that with God's will.
And I think Paul and I both left the mainstream media due to censorship and other issues. But the mainstream media, as you said, they are not doing their job, which is in every every exam of any media degree is, what is the role of the mainstream media? Is to hold the government and the politicians to account. And it's a lot of things, but that is the first main. And they're not doing it. They're actually sort of covering up and working with the government, hegemony in the media.
And Una, you made a brilliant And Una, you made a brilliant point there. I say this now before it goes out of my head about that we have, about if Ireland can send the very talented people they have to help these countries deal with our problems. And if we go back down through the centuries, the one group that went abroad and did so much good work, particularly around education, was our missionaries. So
absolutely, the land of saints and scholars.
That's one example where we have helped people.
Exactly. And so the precedent is there, Paul. Why aren't we doing it again? They didn't come, the hordes didn't come from Africa over to Ireland. No, we went out and we brought our skills and our knowledge and our wisdom with us. And it was very much appreciated, whether we went to Africa. I mean, I'm talking about even the Middle Ages, where they went to Europe, where the monks went to all over Europe. And then in recent times, of course, we had the missionaries who went to Africa, and they educated so many, young African children in various countries in Africa, a fact which is very much appreciated. So why couldn't we still do that? I mean, we don't have to do it we can do it through religion or not religion, as the case may be, whatever people want. But this absurd idea that, no, we must stay we'll send our young people off to other countries, and then we'll import the third world. Now, I know it's not always the third world, but we'll import the third world into our country. It's, where is the logic in that? And, you know, people need to sit down and think about what they're doing instead of following orders and reading from a script.
Yes.
A script that has not been mandated for them by the Irish people.
No.
And we all know that now. So I think the game is up, and I think it's time our government stopped pretending that we don't know what they're doing.
And I can vouch for that, because when I lived in Africa, my mother used to invite the Father Convoy and all the nuns over for dinner every weekend. And my father actually, we lived in Nigeria, in Warri in Nigeria, and like my father was one of them people who went out to help with show and teach people with their expertise, and and in Saudi Arabia as well. I lived in Saudi Arabia, and we were not allowed to practice Christianity. We weren't allowed to be Catholic. I had to live there by their rules and abide by their laws, and but it seemed to be that the case when they come here. But when we go there, we have to do that. So there's a bit of double standards there.
Absolutely. And my own aunt, who was a nun, set up a mission in Bophuthatswana, which was a Black homeland in South Africa. And I went out in my first year after I qualified. I went out to help her in the mission. And she, again, taught all the young African women, you know, all these skills about how to shorthand and typing so they could all get jobs. And the men were taught how to become mechanics. And she did such an amazing job along with the other sisters in her order, and she was just one of many people. So of course the numbers of our religious orders are declining. That might be a factor, but I mean, lay people could go out. The government could be paying lay people to go out and work in these countries to provide a benefit, you know,
and then bring them back after a contract. Bring them back, and you know, and
bring them back.
Get experience. We all came back as expats from Africa and the Middle East. So, and I'm just so delighted my daughter came back. I'm just so happy about that, because I know a lot of her colleagues are staying out there for 3 years in Australia now, not 2, because they say the cost of living, the tax, the money exchange, the savings, and they can't even the price of chocolate and butter has gone up. Why would they come back? And the jobs.
I know. It's just,
Fighting
it's so
for
sad.
jobs.
And you know, our government are just, you know, distracting us with bread and circuses again at the moment, and not dealing with these real issues. But it's a credit to you and Paul that you are dealing with them. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to express. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just my opinion. I'm here in my own capacity. Others may have a different opinion. I you know, fully accept that. I don't expect everybody to agree with everything I say, but why do we not have any debates about these real issues on mainstream media? It's just not allowed. It's just the one narrative, and that is not healthy for any democracy. And I think we all know that.
And we all we debate and argue to learn.
Of course.
That is the key of debates, listening to different point of views and getting our point of view across. And I grew up in Derry in the north, and I had different opinions from my best friends, and we had our different opinions, but we still went out swapping clothes and dancing and makeup, doing our hairs out with our, and dancing to the discos, to the Townsman and the different places in Derry and in Donegal. And
fantastic.
It's a joy. It's actually nice to be able to politely, respectfully disagree with someone, but still be friendly.
Of course. And that's how it should be. But it seems that no alternative discourse is allowed at all. That's very unhealthy for a society. How can a society grow and evolve that way? It can't. It's just designed to control and stifle a society. But we know what the objectives are in other areas as well. So this is just part of that jigsaw puzzle.
Well, Mc Gurk, retired former barrister and senior counsel, Thank you so much indeed for gracing us with yourself here on the Irish Political Roundup. And what I said earlier on is Paul knows I'm a typical straight northerner, and what I said wasn't kind, it was truthful. And that's been my experience of interviewing you in any interaction. I always come away feeling much lighter and much happier after speaking with you. So thank you so very much.
Thank you. It's not all doom and gloom. So, I mean, I have to say, I have hope as well. Things will change, but when people know what's going on, then they can all help. We can all pool our resources to bring about change.
And that's what we needed.
Yeah.
So, Mc Gurk, thank you so
Thank you.
much for taking the time for joining Paul Brophy and myself here on the Irish Political Roundup.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you,
Roisin and Paul. Thank you.